Back at it again. It's the NFL Draft Tailgate Show here on November 28th, Saturday, post Thanksgiving recap. Actually, it's a preview show of the college football action on the slate today. Obviously, a lot of games being postponed or rescheduled or canceled due to the COVID, but we've got you covered from the front to the back. On my draft Knicks, where you at? All right, see the place to be. Ric Serritella, like it is here, broadcasting live at the Jersey Shore. I'm fresh off the beach, baby, believe it or not. 70 degrees here at the Jersey Shore. Of course, right down the road is Ryan Roberts at Rise and Draft, of course, NFL Draft Bible Scouting Director here. And we have John Murphy down in New Orleans, the VP of Personnel for the Toronto Argonauts. So a very fun-filled week, a football Friday that will begin with, gentlemen. Any thoughts and impressions? Of course there are. Ryan Roberts, go ahead.
I'm just upset that David's not on with us today because there were so many doubters on Notre Dame yesterday. But if you actually watched that football game, it was could have went even worse than it actually ended with the 31-17 missed field goal in there. They missed a pass down the sideline that would have been another 6. That game could have easily been 40-17. They allowed no points in the second half to a highly talented North Carolina offense, held them 280 yards below their season average offensively. An outstanding performance from their defense and defensive coordinator Clark Lee in the second half. Feeling good today to be an Irish supporter. Moving into the last 2 games against Syracuse and Wake Forest, it is a good day to wake up as a victor.
Yeah, and I got to say the defense stepped up in a very big way, especially my guy, Javonte Williams. They completely shut him down. Michael Carter, not too much of a factor. So the Notre Dame stepping up on defense. Your boy, Ian Book, getting it done on offense, and he's got a Senior Bowl invite, John. I mean, is Ian Book now, kind of talking his way up into a draftable grade? Is he in the day 3 conversation now?
Not if you listen to Brian Kelly after the game. He gave him the kind of the backhanded compliment at the end of the game, saying, "Hey, stop talking about what he can't do. He's a great college quarterback." Kind of gave him that backhanded compliment there. But you know what? Who cares, right? You're 20 quarters from a national championship. If that's what you do, guess what? Ian Book will have a really good career in whatever else he's doing if it's not in the NFL. But I think that the thing that he had, the 2 things he has going for him to get him that look. First off, it's a matter of days now before he is the all-time winningest quarterback, which is unbelievable. He's going to have 30-plus wins under his belt. Number 2, like it or not, you're doing it with a guy who could be in the top 3 favorites to win the Rookie of the Year in the NFL is not on your roster. So you're doing this year with another group of guys that are kind of becoming household names as they play. So he's not exactly, they're playing, they're making plays, but this is not a household group of guys when you look at it and say, who are their 2 receivers? We know they have tight ends. They're younger guys, but when you mention that whole group of guys, you just have to say, hey, they play very well as a team. And you know what? Their defense makes you one-dimensional. And if that happens, there is a chance that they could double down, which would be something that not a lot of people want to see, but there's a chance that they could double down, on Clemson, which why yesterday, yes, you want to stay undefeated and have the easiest trip possible. They have the ultimate backup card to this whole scenario, which is you have another game with Clemson on the horizon against Trevor Lawrence. You're going to get one of those 4 spots if you beat Clemson twice. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I think yesterday, when you come out and it's 14-7, and that game could have kept going in that direction because a lot of North Carolina games have gone that way. As soon as you made them one-dimensional, the focus of the game kind of changed and kind of switched out there. I think what Book has done, he's a better vertical passer, in the past month. And that kind of mobility that he's shown, especially the plays he made with his legs against Clemson, is that enough to get a 7th round kind of flyer? Possibly. But there'll be some team, that kind of is looking for a guy that wants a camp guy that knows he's just, a good, smart kid who's a winner. There's enough there to get him, in that type of mix. I just don't know if the velocity, is there on some of the throws. And if you're going to just look at him, as a guy that can get, a high enough grade to really get himself in the mix. Does he deserve a Senior Bowl? Yes. Because if you're saying both ways, like deserve it off of the NFL grade, sure, but deserve it off of your college career, absolutely. They gave Senior Bowl invites, to Blake, Sims, like you see guys getting deserved Senior Bowl invites every year for what they've done in college football, and you can't tell me at an All-Star game you don't want to have the winningest quarterback in the history of Notre Dame, your game, it sells tickets. It's good for the PR. And like I said, now you're 20 quarters away from a national championship. Not a lot of people, would have put them, in that type of situation, to say they could, be on that countdown. And 8 of those quarters are very winnable football games against Syracuse and Wake Forest. And then comes the interesting scenario where you could be playing Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama 3 games in a row. You win a national title running that gamut, you've earned it.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Rick, if I want to just give a quick shout out, I think outside of the players for a second, I talked a little bit about it on Twitter yesterday, but I think that the front runner for the Broyles Award this year for the top assistant in college football, I think Clark Lee, the defensive coordinator for Notre Dame, has to be in that conversation. And I think that he's a guy that sooner rather than later might be a candidate for one of those big head coaching jobs that we always throw out there. He was a former fullback at Northwestern, and he actually was an offensive guy to begin his college career. And then obviously he's morphed now into one of the bright young minds on the defensive side of the football, one of the best defensive coordinators. He's only 40 years old, right around that ballpark. So I think that he's a guy, when we're talking about coaching vacancies in college football next year, could be a guy that maybe not a lot of people know about, but should be a guy that you should at least consider and think about.
Well, he disappeared early in the first quarter after those 2 scores and came back out as Clark Kent. Because something went on there because you exchanged your playbook. We mentioned it the other day. He may have, ran inside and got the Water Boys playbook after those first 2 touchdowns, because the rest of the way, there's no way you were having most people believe North Carolina was scoring 3 points the rest of the way with what you had seen happen in those first couple of drives. It looked like it was going to be another 59-53 Wake Forest type shootout, in that situation. So I think it's, when you have these teams, like we want to see a Northwestern or like somebody else get in the mix here, and make it exciting. But if you're going to tell me that we're going to get something of Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, Notre Dame, and potentially all of them are going to go into, minus Clemson, undefeated into a, kind of, bowl dance there that they're going to create here, it's going to get interesting. But the real one as we transition off of this is Ohio State may not qualify. What happens if you have a 7 or 8-0 Northwestern and a 5-0 Ohio State?
You got to look at the resume.
The rules for the Big Ten are independent than everything else. They have 21 days. Ohio State's not playing today. Guess what else they're not doing? They're not playing next week. They're not playing until they play Michigan.
Well, we don't know. The way college football landscape is going, these guys are scheduling opponents on the Superfly. But, I will say this. By the way, welcome to the Notre Dame show here on the NFL. There was a couple other games I want to get to, guys, and then we'll kick into Ohio State and the others. We did have the Civil War rivalry. How about that? The Beavers that we talked about on the State of Football upsetting the Ducks. So Oregon State pulling one out there. Jamar Jefferson with a big day, 226 rushing yards, a pair of touchdowns there. Iowa State taking care of business, pulling it out at the end there, a nail-biter over Texas, 23-20. Brock Purdy with a big day. 312 through the air. How about my guy Chauncey Golston sealing the deal with the Iowa win over Nebraska yesterday? He's been playing lights out. Here's a guy, one FBS scholarship coming out of high school in Detroit. He seals the deal with a big forced fumble. He's now got 4 sacks in his past 5 games. Big interception this year. So Chauncey Golston kind of playing himself into the draft conversation. And how about Coin Dang in the losing effort? The band was not on the field, as far as I know, in this one. Stanford pulling it out over California. But Coin Dang, Ryan, I know this is a guy you've been on, but 14 tackles, just size, range, athleticism. Who knew? He began his career at Virginia Military Institute, where he played basketball and football, and then spent a year at Independence Community College. Now doing his thing at Cal, 120 tackles a season ago, and now off to a hot start here to begin the season. Ryan, quickly, anybody there you want to touch base on?
Well, I think Coin's a good person to start with there. You just mentioned him, right? The background. He played in a 3-4 alignment. He played outside linebacker. He was more of a rush backer at Virginia Military Institute. And then he goes over to Independence. He plays a similar role. And then he comes to Cal last year, and I think he had 120-plus tackles playing inside linebacker next to Evan Weaver. First time playing a true off-ball linebacker on a full-time basis. And when you're talking about traits, you're talking about 6'5+. Now he was up to 250 pounds, supposedly runs in the 4.5s, low 4.6s. Like that is in the positionless athlete that John talked about, right? You can put him in any role. You can just call him, hey, he is a super athletic second-level defender, and you can use him all over the field. I think that he's a guy that I'm really excited about. And then you talked about I don't know what they're calling it now, but it was the Civil War, right? There's a new name for it, apparently. Jamar Jefferson. In 124 meetings I think they've had now in that rivalry, the longest play for an Oregon State player in the history of that game was Jamar Jefferson's 82-yard touchdown in the beginning of that game, which he's firmly on the radars now, obviously, and a guy that I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on. And a little note for you, Rick, Tyler Show's name is actually pronounced Shuck. Did you know that?
I did.
I found that out yesterday. It's the show. It's the Tyler Show.
Yeah.
That's what I told me. It's like shucking an oyster. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that.
Shucking and jiving over there in Eugene. And, he, again, held off Anthony Brown, who transferred from Boston College. And, there's a graduate, senior transfer, I believe, that's not going to have any recent film. So it'll be interesting to see how the draft process plays out for the Anthony Brown. All right, Ric Serritella, Ryan Roberts, John Murphy here, the NFL Draft Tailgate Show. You there, Jesse Frittich and others in the chat room getting down on it. We appreciate all the love and support, streaming live, Twitter, Periscope, Facebook, of course, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. We've got our Black Friday sale extended into the weekend, Familia 50. Take advantage of it. Use it for the publication, the PDF, any online seminar. We appreciate all the love and support since 2002. It's what we do. And we've got some exciting news, so stay tuned. Keep it locked at the NFLDraftBible.com. We're going to dive into today's matchups. If you're new to the show, what we do is preview each game. We give you the game predictions, but we kind of give you the NFL draft slant, some of the prospects that we're keeping an eye on, some of the future guys in next year's draft, some of the guys that we have an eye on for this year's draft and everything else in between. So let's dive into it. Let's begin with some action, fellas. Kent State at Buffalo, 2 undefeated teams. I can't remember the last time these guys were playing on a Saturday, but some star-laden talent here, some guys that'll be playing on Sundays, John.
Yeah, so Jared Patterson, obviously leading, kind of the leading name here, coming off a 300-yard game. He's already halfway to 1,000, and they've only been playing about a month of the season, so far. And then you look on the flip side. Kent State has a possibility to go 4-0 for the first time since about 40-something years. So if you've been a fan of Kent State, it's been a long time coming, and unfortunately it's going to be a long time to keep going because I don't see Kent State on the road getting this one done. But if they do, it'll be because of the play of Dustin Crum, who has really established himself potentially as the best quarterback in the MAC, and also started to get some love, behind the scenes, from the scouts and people there. 12 total touchdowns, only 1 interception in his first 3 games. So one thing we know, we should see some points, in this game, which is usually, pretty much what you get if you're watching a MAC game. There's at least an over a 50 for every MAC game played. I think it might be part of their, TV deal, is that every game must have at least 6 touchdowns in it in order to be televised, because it seems like every time you turn on a MAC game, somebody's scoring a touchdown. So very evenly matched up game. Little more on, I think, the O-line and D-line. If you were looking for where the tiebreaker is in terms of talent, Buffalo kind of in the trenches, I think have the better, on both sides of that. Malcolm Kuntz, all right, now somebody is the fan club member here. Who is it? You got to admit, because I did get a message from somebody telling me that Malcolm Kuntz could be in their top 100. So clearly, they're not only an evaluator, they're also the president of the fan club. So somebody's really on that Malcolm Kuntz train, and probably the same person to list him more as 6'2" instead of 6 foot that he's probably at. So the same guy that's doing his media guide is probably the same guy who told me he's in their top 100, but we'll leave that for another discussion. That's more of a clickbait scenario. Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at you up there, ND. Yeah, I see you over there with your clickbait. So that was probably where we got it from. But hey, at least we know one thing. We're going to see points. It's going to be an exciting game. And I think the factor, like the MAC needs this every once in a while to try to get people away from just seeing them as that conference you watch on the other days there's no football. You want to get the MAC into the consideration that they deserve, and I think this is a perfect stylistic, matchup here. I got Buffalo staying undefeated, but Kent State, you got another team you got to give a lot of credit to, because there have been a lot of down years where 3 wins were 2 years worth of wins, for Kent State for a long period of time. So being undefeated already, knowing you have Dustin Crum and a good outlook on things. I just think Buffalo, the 2 fronts, the 2 lines, that's where, to me, they can get the job done and have an advantage over Kent State. And I'm saying physical football, hey, we're almost turning the page to December, so I'll give it to the physical football side of things.
Sound the sirens. We've got an upset alert on the first one here on the docket. I got, Kent State, we talked yesterday's show, the young up and coming head coaches. How about this guy, Sean Lewis? I mean, his 3rd year on the job. Kent State was 7-6 a year ago, 5-3 in the conference. And I'll tell you what, when I went into the school a couple years ago, there was a real buzz around this guy coming out of Syracuse. The offensive coordinator there for Dino Babers, of course, played at Wisconsin, and he can recruit now. So you've got Kent State. Really, I think this is just kind of the horizon. Finally now, he's getting some of his recruits into the building. And I think this guy here, Sean Lewis, I think this is a stepping stone job for him. Again, just 34 years old. I think in another year or two, he could be in the contention for a Power 5 head coaching job. And I think, Dustin Crum might just have enough here to pull out the upset where, Buffalo could be sleeping on the Golden Flashes. So a little action to get your Saturday morning started here on the NFL Draft Tailgate Show. Let's move it over to the West Coast, all the way over to the islands. That would be your Nevada Strong Wolfpack at the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, Ryan, and Carson Strong, Romeo Dubes. I mean, what more can you say? These guys are as exciting of a quarterback wide receiver duo in the land.
Well, since John's, he's accusing me of being a bandwagoner of certain players, I will say that I am fully, you're hearing this, John, fully on the Carson Strong bandwagon. Nevada quarterback. I'm telling you, man, this kid's got it. What's he have so far? 1,800 yards, 14 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions in 5 games. Romeo Dubes, like you said, over 700 yards, 9 touchdowns of that combination so far. 6'3 plus, 215 pounds, strong arm, better athlete than you think. He was a kid that was very under-recruited. There's a lot of traits to work with. I mean, you could see this kid and you're talking about some of these guys, right? Like the Zach Wilson's loading up and hitting a 55-yard bomb where he's taking a big step, crow hopping and getting everything into his body to make that throw. This kid, effortless release, 60-plus yards. There is legitimate arm talent. When you talk about arm talent, flat-footed, still being able to fire at 60-plus yards. This kid has all the tools, I believe, to be the next Mountain West quarterback to being a first-round pick when he chooses to declare. Probably not this year. He is draft eligible, though, so we need to talk to him.
You never know. You never know.
That's a big NFL comp. You know, like you might need to shorten that down to an actual name of a player. You know, like get me an actual comp. The comp you just gave me was the next best guy from the Mountain West Conference of football in America. You know, who's his comp? Who's his comp? Who are we comparing him to?
I don't have a comp for you. I don't have a comp for you. I don't have a comp for you yet, John. I don't have one. I'll just tell you, he's got the good.
I was thinking Carson
Palmer. It's not terrible. I don't have a great comp for you yet, John. I'll give you one. Next show, you'll have a perfect Carson Strong comp for you, right? All I'll tell you is this kid's got the stuff.
When you figure that out, text it to Turner because it's a West Coast game, so it's going to be him talking about him.
Now, his name is way too easy for Mr. Turner, okay? We need some tougher names than Carson Strong. That's going to be the easiest name he'll have to pronounce in years. So, no Carson Strong. But this game, we talked about Rico Bussey a couple days ago, hasn't had the start that we would maybe expected transferring from North Texas. I think he's got a lot of talent to being somewhere in that day 3 conversation, wide receiver-wise. I think he's got that talent level. Hasn't been used too much yet, averaging under less than 10 yards of reception. So he has not been heavily involved in this offense. I'm hoping that they open up a little bit, but I'm going to take the Wolfpack to continue their winning ways. I think that combination, again, of Strong to Dubes is just going to be a little tough, a little difficult for Hawaii to deal with today. We'll see what Rick's boy Cordero can do to kind of keep the pace. This could be a high-scoring affair, a lot of fun, typical Mountain West game, but I think that Nevada ultimately outlasts Hawaii today.
Yeah, usually
tonight, 11 Eastern time tonight, not tonight.
Tomorrow morning, really. By the time it ends, and usually I like Hawaii at home, but this one I think is too much ammunition, too much firepower. I do think there will be a lot of points on the board, but you see how the line jumped on this one. I think to begin the week, Nevada was favored by 2. Now they're up to like 7 or 8 point favorites. I think this one could be a romp. I'm in on the Carson Strong bandwagon, and I think there's a outside chance that he could indeed declare for this year's draft. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, moving on to the West Coast. We were supposed to have David Turner, so I figured I'd load him up with some pronunciations on the Utah at Washington game over in the Pac-12. Listen, Jake Bentley's Utah debut was not glamorous, right? We saw kind of a QB by committee and, a pair of interceptions last week. Will he get the start this week? I don't know. At this point, give me Nick Starkel in San Jose State over Jacob Bentley in terms of NFL draft prospect status. I think Bentley has now played his way out of the conversation. I don't even think he's a prospect for up north. Maybe we can get him a shot in the Fan Call Football League. Devin Lloyd, though, is one guy I do want to point out on that Utah defense. You talk about all these Utes that were selected last year. I mean, this Utah defense was really stellar. How about Devin Lloyd, though? He actually led the team in tackles last year. I think he had 91 of them. And, last week he had 11 tackles, a couple tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He's playing at a very high level. I think he's now in the mix as a potential day 3 guy. And you'll see it here today. Elijah Molden, you're looking for a slot corner at the next level. He's going to be as good as it gets here in the senior prospect class. I would not be surprised if he pulls off a sneaky interception. I got Washington here kind of in cruise control. They go up to 3-0. Utah, what a difference a year makes. They will now be 0-2 with their depleted defense there led by Mr. Devin Floyd. All right, there's your West Coast flavor in your ear. Oklahoma at West Virginia. We were going to discuss that one as a COVID cancellation. But we talked about all these underclassmen tight ends. Austin Stogner, he's kind of this H-back type of prospect. He's only a sophomore. He's got 3 touchdowns now in his past 4 games. He's got like 400 or 500 yards receiving. Just a guy to keep an eye on. moving forward for the future. How about this one? Sound the sirens again, John. I don't know. I've got a feeling Maryland at Indiana. We've seen the Taulia Tagovailoa magic once before. They travel into Indiana. The Hoosiers, of course, riding high with their number 12 ranking. How do you see this one shaking out?
Yeah, I mean, you really got to again, there's not too many times, coming off a loss, you're going to say that it was, a program changer or, something that you look forward to. But Indiana, how they played at the end of that game last week, when they go up 42-21 or they're down 42-21 to Ohio State, how they played the remainder of that game and continuing to get it back to getting the ball and it's a one-score affair. You really got to like what you saw out of, Michael Penix. And it was really doing it without a lot of ground game. They didn't have the ground game that they've had, most of the season. And they absolutely annihilated Ohio State's secondary. Ohio State's front, yes, gave Indiana all kinds of struggles there, a lot of the time and put a lot of pressure, on Penix. But he still had 5 total touchdowns in the game, made some incredible plays. When this game really could have gotten out of hand. And I think they kind of keep that momentum. If this was at Maryland, I would agree. And I would think that could be a letdown with a Maryland team that's kind of feeling good about themselves as well. I think the difference here is Maryland's 2-1, like only played a handful of games, whereas Indiana is kind of in the groove of their season, there. And I think that, as much as we want to, talk about, Jake Funk and what the Tagliavoa family is doing there, at the, number 2. I still think that Indiana, what they showed last week, they're on to something here in the midst of their season. I think Maryland gives a much better account of themselves than what we would have expected to see out of this game when you're saying how Maryland has played to date. So I think it's a win-win. But in this type scenario, Indiana is going to be the Ohio State. Maryland's going to play the role of Indiana last week. And I could see a similar outcome with Indiana on top, but a close 7 to 10 point swing game with Indiana. I think they have a little bit more in terms of total talent. And Maryland doesn't have the guys to cover what Indiana's putting out there. So that would be the stressor point to me, is that I'm not sure Maryland on the regular can put enough stops out on the field to then make this more than a close type contest.
No, well, it's going to be, if Maryland wants to stay in it, they just got to match them point for point and go up and down the field with them and just hope that it comes down to a last possession type of situation like we saw earlier on in the season with Taulua working that magic. I think it was on a Friday Night Light special. But I would not be surprised here. Here's one where, I do expect Indiana to win. However, it would not surprise me if there is a little bit of a letdown after shooting their load last week. Maryland could come in here and sound the sirens with a potential upset alert there. So Maryland at Indiana. Let's go over to from the Big Ten to the ACC, Ryan. We will skip over Ohio State at Illinois, where Larry Johnson was set to become Ohio State's first black head coach, even on the interim level. That will not occur today with that game being postponed. So we go over to ACC Nation, Louisville 3-6 at Boston College 5-4. It's been a while since we talked about Boston College, Ryan. We kind of had them on the bye week here on the NFL Draft Tailgate show, but some prospects here to pay attention to.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. This is one of the best Boston College offenses I can remember, probably dating back to the Matt Ryan days, right? Because we finally have a talented signal caller in Phil Dracovic, the former Notre Dame transfer, who's all of 6'4 plus, 230 pounds, athletic, has a strong arm, and he's got some legit talent at wide receiver with Zay Flowers, the really speedy, deep threat, number 4 there. And then they have maybe the breakout star at the tight end position in all college football for draft eligible players, talking about Hunter Long, who's kind of the do it all. He can do a little bit of everything, big body pass catcher, who I think is going to go a lot earlier if he chooses to declare in the 2021 NFL draft than maybe people even know about right now. So I think that offense is really exciting. And then they have a couple guys on defense, Isaiah McDuffie, Matt Richardson, who are the top 2 tacklers in all of college football. Now, they're not primo prospects, right? They're kind of undersized, athletic guys who are just, have a great motor and great want to play football, and they're around the football at all times. They're probably more special teams players at the next level, maybe get a look on late day 3, but they're probably more priority kids at this point. Maybe Richardson might sneak into the day 3, but I think McDuffie kind of fits that mold more than Richardson does. And Louisville, I mean, it's a very unfortunate year for Louisville after the nice start under Coach Satterfield in year 1, 8-5. I know a lot of was expected with them, with Michael Cunningham, the quarterback, and Tutu Atwell, wide receiver. Javion Hawkins has opted out of the season, so they don't have their dynamic running back either. So there's still some players to keep an eye on offensively with Tutu and Michael Cunningham potentially down the road, but it's definitely not the offense that we were expecting going into the year for Louisville. And defensively, they're just a little bit of a mess right now. Boston College offensive line also, I have to mention some of those guys, right? Zion Johnson playing left tackle, who's going to be an offensive guard at the next level, played it in 2019. Very talented going to the Senior Bowl. Mike Vrabel's son, Tyler Vrabel at right tackle. Got Alec Lindstrom, the brother of Chris Lindstrom at center. There's a lot of NFLers. Ben Petrula at right guard, who's played every position on that Boston College offensive line at this point. Very talented offensive group. I think it's going to be much too much at the end of the day for Louisville to handle. Louisville's dealing with a very, very tiring season, I would say, at this point, with just all the opt-outs and injuries and just underwhelming performances.
Tell everybody the real deal. Louisville has pulled the plug on their season. Come on, you can do it.
They have pulled the plug. Hey,
tell them why. Tell them why. Tell the fans why. Be honest. Scott Satterfield can't talk out of both sides of your mouth, buddy. Can't do it. Can't be ripping your players for opting out due to COVID and then interviewing for the South Carolina job. Shut your mouth and take your ass whipping today, buddy.
So, and I agree, John. It is going to be an ass whipping today. Boston College overwhelms them.
Can't be ripping 19 and 20-year-old kids for opting out and protecting themselves, and you're over there interviewing for the South Carolina job. Bad look.
It's definitely a very it's a very, I don't even know the word for it. Obviously, it's an inconsistent outlook. It is a bad look, as you said. It is not a good reflection of what it was looking like he was building right out of his first year. Yeah. Terrible look there. And like John said, they don't have too much firepower now to deal with the talented Boston College offense. I think that they end up getting rolled probably by 3 scores today.
Yeah, I think this is the lock of the day. Boston College here over Louisville. Not exactly how Mr. Satterfield expected the season to play out. But, hey, if you told me you went 3-6 and had a chance to take an SEC job, not a bad year for a losing season. So there you have it with the Chestnut Hill. And we go over to Clemson hosting Pittsburgh. Here you go. Kenny Pickett coming off a career day last week, 404 passing yards. The gamer Kenny Pickett is the Senior Bowl invite guy, traveling to Clemson. Of course, Trevor Lawrence completing 70% of his passes on the season. His backfield mate, Travis Etienne, not so hot this year. Averaging 5.2 yards per carry, which is 2 yards lower than his career average. So, I think that Clemson is going to handle their business here, even though Pittsburgh does have a good defense, right? Not a great defense, a good defense. If they had some of their opt-out guys playing, well, then, hey, this might be a different story. But I'm going to say Clemson takes this one easily here. Ryan, any thoughts with Pittsburgh at Clemson?
No, I think that, Pittsburgh has been a little up and down. Clemson they're out to prove something, right? With Trevor Lawrence coming back in his first game back since the COVID hits. They need to prove that they are right on tap. They're the team that we think they are, despite the loss to Notre Dame. And I'm sure that they have a lot of, internal motivation right now to not only finish the year strong, but then have that rematch against the ACC championship game against Notre Dame. So I think that this is going to be a very one-sided affair today with Trevor Lawrence returning for Clemson.
All right, let's go over to the SEC, fellas. We got some marquee matchups here. Of course, SEC football and some new faces, some old faces in new places, actually. Mike Leach versus Lane Kiffin, Mississippi State at Mississippi. Two guys trying to, kind of stamp their identity on their new programs. And I will say, if you missed the feature article on last year's Egg Bowl game and the feature on Elijah Moore and how the trickle down effect of him, kind of peeing on the fire hydrant there kind of sent ripple effects into the coaching community. And really, as a cause and effect, they went into great depth and elaborate detail of like literally hundreds of jobs kind of moving around because of this action that got the coaching staff canned there. But Elijah Moore, credit to that young man, he has bounced back in a big way. Unbelievable. Over 1,000 yards receiving already through 7 games with 8 touchdowns on the season. Elijah Moore, this is a guy knocking on that top 100 status. How about Kenny Yeboah? I mean, he transfers over from Temple, doesn't really have too much going on during his Owls career. All of a sudden, now he comes to Mississippi, and he's just making plays all over the field. He's parlayed it into a Senior Bowl, and now suddenly he's a draftable tight end there, probably on the day 3 range. And how about Mississippi State pass rusher Marquise Spencer? 3 sacks so far this season, 7.5 tackles for loss. He's got a bunch of tackles for loss during his career, so he'll be one to look for here. I don't know. Leach versus Kiffin. I'm going to give Kiffin the slight edge here, John, but I think this game could go either way.
Yeah, I think they've met once before, and I think it might have been a Leach win. In that one, I think they've only met once. They're going to have to kind of warm up to this rivalry as, there's normally not as much, good interaction between the coaches, in this matchup. So, we'll have to see. The year before that, they had a nice little in-game brawl, which I think I got at least 4 to 6 guys kicked out of the game. And then last year, obviously, the penalty that led to the missed extra point and everything that came out of that. Matt Corral, if he's playing well and he gets hot, it could be a game that gets, kind of out of the hands of Mississippi State. But the way we've seen these two teams play, it won't be shocking to see 100 passes and 10 runs, out of these two squads. They're not much, Matt Corral might be the best runner that you're going to see all day. They've clearly now made the decision and are going, full on with the younger quarterback, there in Rodgers. So, I think Ole Miss has a little more altogether, in this, in their bigger games, throughout the season. Ole Miss has shown up, and given a little more, competition across the board to the bigger teams that they've played against. So I think Ole Miss gets the win here. And I still think that Kiffin has a little better kind of trajectory there. With Mississippi State, it's still going to be, selling this model, and then getting what you're going to get as a buy-in.
A broken model.
Coming with a premium, right? Like it's coming with a premium of what kind of O-line you're going to have and what kind of skill guys you're going to get. And maybe you find that next Dexter McCluster or that next Tyreek Hill, type athlete that'll go to Mississippi State, but you're going to be doing it with no run game. And can you play against these better teams and be that one-dimensional with the type of athletes that teams have on the field at Will and Sam and Free and in the secondary, unless you just are devoid of making tackles and don't know how to match up in zone like what happened with all those young guys week 1 against LSU. This is not looked like what you were expecting. It looked more like a ground floor, kind of thing with their program. So I still think Mississippi State has a lot of room to have to kind of grow to see what's going to happen with Mike Leach there. Lane Kiffin, he has Matt Corral. He's got him this year and next year. That could be a team that next year kind of makes that surprise, move in terms of, getting to that 8-9, victory plateau. And we know the good thing is that Lane Kiffin is the head coach, so he can't be hooking up with anybody's on staff.
Well, I tend to agree with the outlook there. And you mentioned LSU. They travel into College Station, taking on the number 5 Aggies of Texas A&M. Ryan 5-1, riding high on that Kellen Mond magic carpet ride.
Yeah, and I have to say I'm steadily moving over a little on Kellen Mond. I wasn't a huge fan early on. I'm not a huge fan either way, but I think that he might be a nice developmental player to at least keep an eye on. I think the real matchup is, well, the interesting matchup, I should say, is Texas A&M does have a couple offensive tackles in Carson Green and the left tackle that are, I think, draftable prospects at the end of the day. And they have a young star in LSU named Ali Gay, who is a really athletic 6'6" defensive end who's put some nice reps on film. So I want to see just how much pressure they can put on Kellen Mond and see what LSU does in return. Because we talk about guys like Terrace Marshall, who's had a breakout season for them without Jamar Chase in the fold, and Justin Jefferson off to the NFL. He's kind of been one of the big risers among the wide receiver group for the 2021 cycle. So want to see a little bit. I think Texas A&M at the end of the day might just have a little too much defensively comparative to LSU, and they might have a little bit. I don't picture a shootout here. I picture Texas A&M maybe a 10-point victory in this one. Kellen Mond does enough. LSU, very young offensively outside of Terrace Marshall. Texas A&M just does enough to silence them a little bit today, and Texas A&M takes the victory, probably about 10 points or so.
Yeah, I think Jimbo's going to have the boys ready for this one. When has Texas A&M really ever been this close, this late in the season? And, I know we talked about the college football playoff picture at the beginning of the show. I do not believe that it's going to stay the way it is right now. These 4 teams, yeah, and an ideal world in the TV broadcast dream, hey, we'd love to have it, right? Somebody's going to lose. And if they do, well, hey, Texas A&M, they're going to be right there to jump right in. Either, the Aggies or the Gators. One of those teams is going to have to position themselves to be there. I know you talked about this game yesterday. John, did you want to go on the record with an official prediction?
Yeah, I think, the thing that they've been able to do is A&M has avoided turnovers, and a lot of the games avoided, other than in that Florida going back and forth, big plays. And to me, that's where this could get more interesting, for them, because little by little, like I said, it's not because of his coaching. It's by taking less of Bo Pelini and letting it more be the athletes on the field. They have an underrated Andre, Anthony, who's got 4 sacks, leads the team as a senior, not a guy that was even on the NFL radar at LSU. Here's a game where Jabril Cox gives LSU the type of linebacker that can both spy on Mond and be able to create some, opportunities to make tackles against Spiller that other teams can't. And they can match up with the guys that A&M has been going play action off of that run game. So if you now get some of those turnovers, the ball bouncing, this is the same type of game, like in the mid-20s, not a lot going on offensively either way, that a big play going either way, I think gives LSU a better shot in this matchup, because you have not seen A&M play, and LSU is a little by little defensively playing a little bit better, and you've seen that young quarterback. Once he learns how to be a quarterback and don't just use that arm, has a chance to establish himself as their quarterback moving forward, which will be another whole interesting discussion when you consider they have the freshman and Miles Brennan and a top 10 quarterback in next year's class already committed. The more you see out of TJ Finley, the more somebody's going to be hitting the transfer portal, button there. And for me, Jimbo Fisher against LSU in a huge moment, and it's Kellen Mond. Okay, I've seen 3 or 4 weeks of Kellen Mond not be who he's been. Now when the pressure is on, will Kellen Mond be the guy we've seen in the last 3 or 4 weeks, or the Kellen Mond that has been partially responsible for why LSU has won in this game 8 out of 9 times? Make it 9 out of 10.
Sound the
See ya,
siren.
Aggies. See ya, Aggies.
Well, I will say this. I would not be surprised, right? LSU, despite, all the players that left for the NFL, they did win the national championship. They do have some talent on that team. So we'll see if Kellen Mond can, stay cool, stay composed, play to the ability that he has shown this year, because he has been a different quarterback, especially
A&M's front is what's made a difference. Their O-line has played better cohesively than the individual parts.
Right. And so he's not under duress. He's not.
Yeah. And then I
much.
think when you look at that, you're saying, hey, other teams do not have the physical traits of those guys to say, hey, Cox can drop back into coverage on Wanamaker and at least make it a real matchup. Right? If you wanted to, you could put Stingley on him, because A&M's outside receivers are not their best. That's not where their best talent on their roster lays. And little by little, they have kind of taken some of the coaching stuff down to say, let the O-line do what they do best. Let's not overcoach it. And defensively, take some of the strategy, take some of the, let's do less with all these fronts. Let's do less with all the coverage stuff. Let the athletes play. And all of a sudden, you've seen a little bit of momentum, a couple of stops. And I know it's Arkansas, but down the stretch in that game, you make stops, you get off the field. Again, this is not the most potent offense, that you're playing against. And if you make it a 4-quarter game, like I said, you at least have what it takes to make this be a game that could get sideways, on A&M, only because the physical matchups are now not in their favor. And for pretty much a month straight, they've had the physical matchups in every game except for the one in Florida, and they overcame Kyle Trask and how they played in that game and came back and won. But you got to admit, this month of what we've seen out of Kellen Mond, it's either maturity and development toward being the player he will be in the future, but it's also only a month prior to that you saw a very inconsistent player that in games like this, bad plays, turnovers, some incomplete passes that you have to be a little bit better on here because of the length and athletic ability, of the defenders. These are the games he has struggled to consistently make big passes, move the chains, get them on third down into shorter third down situations. And to me, if A&M is to continue this, Ira Spiller's got to have a bigger game. They got to run the ball against LSU, which is something in, like I said, 8 of the last 9 meetings, it's gone LSU's way. And the major reason is controlling the trenches.
It's going to be a fun one to watch. I know the NFL scouts will be watching Kellen Mond very closely. I'll be watching that matchup. I'll also be watching this matchup. What a better way to end than 2 ranked opponents in the SEC, the Iron Bowl, number 22 Auburn at number 1 Alabama, minus Nick Saban. Steve Sarkisian gets the call, and we're not talking about the last call, are we, John?
No. The COVID call, is what he's got, and it gives Sarkisian a chance, to kind of sit on the sideline. Speaking of somebody who used to not be afraid of last calls, and now I want to see in these decisions, the in-game decisions, right? It's not about the interviews because Saban doesn't give good interviews. The pregame speech. Yeah, his is probably I'd give him a pretty good pregame speech, especially for an Iron Bowl type matchup. But the little in-game decisions, what different things that you're going to see, different things Auburn, would throw out at you that we know that is a Saban-esque, type of thing, to be able to see something in a game or notice something that he's seen on film, that collaborative effort. If somebody got a secret cell phone, I guess, maybe we'll find out, or, we'll know one day. But I think that's an interesting thing just to see early, if there was a bad play, if there was a gadget play that Auburn runs early and gets an early lead, or, something that they might need to change or adjust at halftime, this does give Auburn as a staff a chance to say they could outcoach Alabama, because that's not happening if Saban's there live. A little virtual Saban head that may or may not be, on somebody's laptop, stowed away in the press box, is another, situation or scenario. But we've mentioned it all week. I know that, hey, if we need to look no further for the president of the Bo Nix fan club. He's sitting right over here, but hey, it's scholarship time. It's time to get off the Patrick Nix, express. You got to set up your own opportunity here. It's set up for you. But I just don't think Auburn defensively, I don't see them having enough answers to kind of slow this down. Can they make it more fun? Yes. Can they make a little bit of drama in this game somewhere in the first half or, somewhere in the third quarter or so? Possibly. They have enough firepower, to do that. But I haven't seen Auburn show me that they can make enough defensive stops in this game to make it be less than a 2-score game. I don't know. I don't see it. And I think that Sarkisian, even with just a little virtual head of, Nick Saban somewhere on somebody's iPad, occasionally telling him what to do if he needs it, they could probably get away with it. 2-score game, without, a virtual, without a live and in color Nick Saban, probably be a 3-score game plus, with Nick Saban, in attendance. I just think the firepower on Alabama's side, it hasn't been stopped to date, and Auburn's not going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I think the Tide are favored about 25 in this matchup. So I tend to agree, though, with you, John. I think Auburn can hang around maybe for a half and make it a close game, but Crimson Tide too much to tango with. Ryan, any thoughts here?
Well, I think what John said, right? Like there are some pieces on Auburn's defensively that are interesting, right? Like the super sophomore linebacker, Owen Popo. They have a really talented secondary. Roger McCreary at the corner, Jamion Sherwood at safety with Smoke Monday at safety. Like there's some guys defensively on the second and third levels that you can get excited about a little bit. Corey Wooden, the defensive end, outside linebacker, edge player, is an interesting player, leads them in tackles for loss with 8 so far this year, only a redshirt freshman. So like there's some guys that you can get excited about and guys that I think that Auburn can grow with, and going into next year, it could be a very improved team. But I do agree. I think that the biggest difference here is because there's going to be some good matchups, right? Because Auburn has Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, the fastest player in college football, Tank Bigsby, the true freshman running back who's been very good so far. I think the real difference, though, is when you're talking about trench play, the traditional, what you think of when you think of SEC football. Alabama has several NFLers up front with the left tackle, number 70, who's an excellent football player, Deontay Brown, Senior Bowler. They have the center, Landon Dickerson, who I think is a Senior Bowler as well. I think he got the invite. The right tackle, Evan Neal's the next big thing on the other side, the bookend of the tackles there. And I think that Auburn defensively just doesn't have anybody in the trenches that's going to be able to deal with those guys. Najee Harris, I imagine, to have another big day offensively for Alabama. I think that the running attack for Alabama is going to be more the decider of this football game. I think the game is going to get away from Auburn because at some point Bo Nix has to try to score with this Alabama team that has been so explosive with Devonta Smith and Najee Harris and Slade Bolden, right? Their new slot guy that nobody knew about, John Mechie, who's made that seamless transition. Like there's so many guys that Auburn's going to have to contend with. I think that Auburn is a young team that next year could maybe make a nice jump. But for now, I think Alabama just has too much, and it's going to, at some point, probably in mid-third quarter, the game's just going to get a little far away from Auburn.
Yeah, you mentioned Tank Bigsby. That's definitely a good one to remember. And then don't look now. Alabama's got another one of these freshman running backs. I'll tell you, the pipeline never ends. I think he had over 100 yards rushing last week. So Brian Robinson, I mean, he's just been kind of stashed on the bench and waiting for an opportunity there. But just so many guys on that Alabama team, so many guys in the Alabama backfield that are going to be playing on Sundays. Auburn's going to have their work cut out for themselves. All right, well, hey, it's been another hour of power. I can't believe we made it through. We're running on fumes over here at the NFLDraftBible.com. We can't stop. We won't stop, and we're really prepping for our future announcement. We're really excited to be bringing it to the world soon. All the people out there in the chat room who join us. I see Charlie chiming in, and Jesse was with us today. I know a lot of you guys hanging in that don't chime in the chat room, so we do appreciate all the love and support. We're sending all our love and support out to the bandaged doctor, David Turner, who couldn't recover from Friday night scout school to make it here today. He is nursing a bum ankle, so we wish him well if he's out there listening. We missed you today, David, and it's time for parting shots, fellas. So, we're about an hour away from kickoff. It's week 13, I think, of the college football action, week 12 of the NFL scheduled tomorrow. And, of course, we'll be back at it again starting Monday. We'll take a day to recover and recuperate from all the turkey festivities and come back bigger, better, and stronger on Monday morning. But what would you like to impart upon the listening audience for today's show, Ryan?
I just want to thank everybody for taking some time with us. It's crazy times, obviously during the holiday season, throwing some COVID, and it's really strange times. But as Rick said, we have a lot of really exciting news that's coming very shortly on NFL Draft Bible. Just got fresh off of Friday Night Scout School. Only 5 seminars left in the book for Friday Night Scout School, and we have all these breakdowns in a couple weeks. A lot of exciting things around here, and I appreciate with you guys having me on a few times this week, being off from work, enjoying a little time off. So appreciate you all, appreciate everybody in the chat room, and just look forward to all the soon announcements to be made about what we have cooking in the kitchen here.
Absolutely. And we had Ryan Roberts multiple times this week. I know John was looking forward to that, and he's going to miss you next week, Ryan. Parting shot for the people here, John.
Yeah, so, as we've all gotten used to doing different things, November 28th normally means prepping to go downtown. I would have been prepping to get dressed and head downtown as Southern and Grambling normally play, this afternoon. And normally you get a raucous pregame outside. It's an amazing to see, fans of both teams, but then also people who went to school together at the separate schools 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, who come together every year and have been rivals, but the rivalry is for 4 quarters. The interaction pre and post game and the party atmosphere, and the love and support for the HBCU programs and the historical value of those 2 programs. We long know what Eddie Robinson, gave to the sport. We know all the players that have played at Grambling. We all know what Pete Richardson did at Southern, and a long lineage of players, Aeneas Williams probably being the most recognizable, there from Southern University. So that was normally, what would go on November 28th weekend. It would be easy to get driven down. Your normal problem after the game was trying to get your ride out of the stadium because the crowds would just take over the streets, and the winning team was not always the team that was walking out of there with the spoils, because the halftime show, the winner of the halftime show, you could possibly win or lose the game. But if you lost the halftime show, the Battle of the Bands, when Southern and Grambling were in there, Southern knew one thing. They might not always win the game, but they might have a little something for you at halftime, and it normally was the white drummer. You pulled out that white drummer in your band, and you had the crowd rolling, in your direction. So the festivities, but the culture of college football, right? We're talking about the Egg Bowl. We're talking about, the 74-72 overtime matchup a couple of years ago that all of a sudden made LSU and Texas A&M a rivalry, right? Chris Davis will go down in history as the greatest player in the history of the Iron Bowl, the single best play, in the history of the Iron Bowl. So all of those matchups that are all over the country, there's so many little ones that get played that don't get the kind of the flavor that you hear. But every year at this time, you get a lot of those rivalry games that are right in somebody's backyard. We're not getting as much of that this year. We're not getting the kind of interaction, and that'll always be something, that I've remembered for those games. And one other thing that could happen today, and Rick and I for sure, and we'll see what happens with Ryan. I don't know if we've gotten a discovery yet of what exactly Ryan is having there. Do we know if we're having a boy or a girl yet there, Ryan?
We're having a girl.
So, okay. So 3 for 3 on the girl dads on this scenario. And I have a 12-year-old who will be definitely wanting to watch this afternoon when Vanderbilt plays Missouri. Hats off Sarah Fuller, 1 week after winning a national championship as a goalie on the soccer team. Maybe a little bit of that national championship magic could rub off on Vanderbilt's football team.
They need it.
You kick them a game-winning field goal, and wouldn't that be something? But the mere factor as a competitor, as a student athlete, especially in this day and age with everything going on, to be able to go from playing on that stage and winning a national championship as a soccer player to then flip around in the same week and be able to perform well enough to beat out anybody else on campus and potentially kick a field goal for a Power Conference 5. I know it's Vanderbilt, still in the Power Conference 5 team in the SEC. It'll be really interesting to watch Vanderbilt and Missouri and see what happens in that game. And we've all seen it, right? They're women getting named GM in Major League Baseball. There's women coaches along the sidelines, in Tampa Bay, Arizona, San Francisco. We've seen what the Spring League and the XFL have done. We see them on the sidelines now refereeing, and now you're seeing a female athlete get a chance to kick in a major NCAA game. Hats off, regardless of which way it goes. Hats off to you. And we know one thing. If you do make that kick, Ralph Ventry will have a special place in his heart for you, because you know what? There's been a lot worse people trying field goals in the last couple of years. Just look at some of these stats that we got for you. So Sarah Fuller, you could go 1 for 1 and get yourself on the radar. And next week, you might be on Rise and Drafts, updated list. He might have you in there.
Clickbait.
He might have you in there.
First round.
4-6 kicker who's good, all around athlete. So Sarah Fuller has a chance to get on the radar, this week. But all joking aside, that's a hell of accomplishment to even be considered
Very
to
cool.
do that in a calendar week, to go from one sport and win a national championship and then be dressing for Vanderbilt. We finally found a way to get Vanderbilt on the show, and no better way to close it out.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah, got any plans this Saturday? We could use you over here. Hopefully,
bring over that national championship so we can see what one looks like.
Yeah, right. Well, hopefully they get a chance to kick a field goal or an extra point. Watch them not score any touchdowns. Watch them not put not getting field goal range, not score a touchdown. I don't know if she's handling the kickoff duties, but when she does get into the game, she will become the first female to participate in a Power 5 college football game, which is really a monumental thing. This is a monumental show each and every Saturday, live 10 a.m. Eastern. We greatly appreciate you tuning in. It's a can't stop, won't stop situation here on the NFL Draft Bible live stream. We're live 6 days a week. Of course, the State of Football, 9 a.m. Eastern, along with John Murphy and myself, each and every